Hello, and welcome back to Skep's Unnamed Deck Showcase. Now that the most recent round of selection boxes have disappeared from the shop, I thought now is a good enough time as any to go through the series of decks supported by the cards we were all wailing on. While I was trying to pull for a single copy of Nightmare Cerberus, I managed to pull both a copy of Vampire Duke and Vampire Sucker. Since the Vampire deck synergized with the Cerberus I was already trying to pull for, I thought now would be a good time to ask if the Smokin' a Zombie deck this side of the river Styx is worth playing in 2023. Let's take a look at the deck builder and see just what's growing in this graveyard. So here we are with the deck. And despite the card's metagame impact back in 2018, you'll immediately notice we're not playing a single copy of Scarlet Scourge. This is because with the introduction of the Nightmare package, as well as Vampire Sucker, the deck has morphed itself into a deck built around locking your opponent out of the game with an Ibli that you've turned into the zombie using your skill, preventing your opponent from making Link Disciple, while setting a copy of Vampire Taker face down with a Vampire Duke in your graveyard to revive on your opponent's turn and destroy any card they control, while milling you additional zombie names. With an understanding of our deck's current game plan, let's go over the card by card. Starting our deck list, we will begin with the skill because it is mission critical to our game plan. We are playing Bones with Posthumous Army. This skill can be used each time our life points decrease by 1,000. A trivial activation condition given most of our vampires cards will bleed us out of 500 life points at a time. All monsters on the field and monsters in both players' graveyard become zombie type until the end of your opponent's turn. This is perfect for stopping Salamangreat from making Balinks, or Cybers players from making Elphase or Update Jammer. Additionally, this turns your Ibli into a zombie, meaning they cannot link it off for Link Disciple or Balinks. So unless they're playing exactly Nightmare Mermaid, a card that has been seeing less play in favor of Cybers Link ones, your opponent will not be able to out your special summon lock. We're playing 5 starters in Gozuki and Samurai Skull. If you have 3 Gozuki, you play 3 Gozuki. These cards are fantastic. Gozuki is an ignition effect, and Samurai Skull is an on-summon effect. Both of these send any zombie-type monster from your deck to the graveyard. Samurai Skull floats if it's destroyed by a card effect owned by your opponent. Gozuki, when it leaves the field, can banish another zombie monster to special summon a zombie from your hand. Continuing through our card by card, the card we want to draw in addition to our 2 starters, Retainer, because we would rather discard, open Skull or Gozuki plus Familiar. What Familiar does is, if it's in the graveyard, you can discard 1 vampire card from your hand or send 1 face-up vampire card from your field to the graveyard. Special summon this card, but banish it when it leaves the field. So we want this in our hand because we can send Familiar, the second piece of Vampire Search support. When this card is in the graveyard, you can discard a vampire or send a face-up vampire from your field to the graveyard to special summon this. Retainer searches a spell. Familiar searches a monster. We would rather draw Retainer because if we send Familiar off of Skull or Gozuki, we can discard the cat, summon the bat, search Duke, and then discard Duke for the Retainer, adding us Takeover to get our plays off to the races. For our Vampire Tribute summons, we've got 1 Vamp, which is useful for situations in which you need to clear 2 monsters off your opponent's field or have full zones on your field, because Sucker lets you tribute your opponent's monsters. Sometimes you want to tribute one of yours and one of your opponents because you have a full board. That's what this is for. 1 copy of Sorcerer. It comes up in weird scenarios. I'm not too concerned about playing it. You could definitely cut it. Continuing on, what does Duke do? Duke is a Debris Dragon for the archetype. The reason we play 2 is because we want to discard 1, because this has a separate effect when it's normal and special summoned. When you normal summon this card, target a vampire, special summon it from the graveyard. Cannot be used as summon material except for the summon of a dark monster. That's why we're playing the 1 Dark Ardreas, although spoilers, I would cut this card and just not play a rank 5 Xyz. When this card is special summoned, you can declare 1 card type, monster, spell, trap, make your opponent mill that card. That is why we want it in the graveyard, so we can activate Takeover, activate Kingdom, revive Duke, mill our opponent, and then pop our opponent's cards. That is your turn 1 play in addition to the zombie Ibli lock. We got 1 Monster Reborn, 1 Kingdom, 2 Domain, 1 Awakening, 1 Takeover, and 3 Desire for our spells. Reborn is an extender. Kingdom is a garnet for Takeover. Desire is the best card to draw. Domain is the second best card to draw. You could be playing 1, but I really like this card a lot. It is the double summon of the deck that gives your zombies lifelink, or rather vampires lifelink. Desire is the Foolish Burial if you control another face-up card, or a Monster Reborn if you control a face-up card. In the case of either, if you want a Foolish, you have to target a card you control, make its level the same level as this vampire you mill. And in the case of the Reborn, you send the monster you target to the graveyard to revive a vampire. It's obviously not as good as Monster Reborn, but it is named Vampire, and it is also a Foolish Burial, so it is much more modular than Reborn. Takeover activates Kingdom, revives Duke, mills our opponent, pops a card, very strong. Vampire Awakening, I don't know if I've ever resolved this. Maybe you could even cut it, I'm not sure. And Monster Reborn is just here as an extender to play through hate, because this deck really hates back row. You can play Super Poly, but I feel like your Ibly lock is usually strong enough to win you the game with the takeover pop, so I consider Super Poly a sacky one of that just wins you the game that you're already winning at the cost of your deck's consistency. So I wouldn't really play it. Also, the deck's extra deck is really tight, and I don't really want to play a Super Poly target over any of these cards. This is the most flexible card, but I honestly would rather just play Sylvan Princess Sprite to get familiars off the field. Speaking of mandatory extra deck cards, you need to be playing 2 Nightmare Link 2s. Optimal to be playing one of each for flexible situations. Although if you did not pull one from the selection box like I almost didn't, you can get away with 2 Phoenix, but you do need to be playing 2 Nightmare Link 2s. 1 Nightmare Mermaid, we're making this the way God intended by linking off our Link to Nightmare, discarding a card, and summoning Ibly from the deck so that we can use our Posthumous Army, make Mermaid and Ibly zombies to link for our Vampire Link to Sucker. 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn. This card is great. Unicorn plus Duke, Unicorn plus Vamp is lethal. You can usually make those while tributing off your opponent's monsters, and then kill your opponent with Unicorn and Vamp. Rank 2s, we're playing Crumble Logos for situations in which we need to preserve a retainer without banishing it, and we need damage on the field. And number 65, Gin Buster, for situations in which we send something like a retainer to the graveyard with a Vampire Desire and then revive the retainer. We have a Dark rank 2 we can make. This one probably will come up more if you cut your Crumble Logos, but I would rather have 2 rank 2s for damage, because sometimes you need, you open weird hands in which this is the only play you can make, and you need to push for damage while not banishing your retainers with by making them overlay units, so I would not recommend necessarily cutting this card. This card I would recommend cutting. I was going back and forth. This is like the one flex spot I feel like in your deck. I guess if you really hate Crumble Logos, you can play 2, and I would either play Ardreas, Crumble Logos, or Sylvan Princess Sprite. Princess Sprite lets you turn 2 familiars into a mill spell and keep them in the graveyard, so it is worth experimenting with. This deck probably really only has 1 flexible extra deck spot, and those are the 3 I would play. I would definitely play Gin Buster over all of the 3 that I mentioned, but the 7th and 8th card can be any combination of Crumble Logos, Princess Sprite, and Ardreas as the cards that I would suggest. That's the list. We're on 24 in the main deck, and of course 8 in the extra. Let's take a look at some games and see how this list performed. Game number 1 here, going to be up against a Reginald Shark Castle on Mermail, though you wouldn't guess it based on the contents of their opening hand. They're going to do the best Mermail combo in existence, set 3 and pass. We're going to draw into exactly what we wanted, a discard for our starter. We're going to send Familiar, revive Familiar by discarding Retainer, add a Sorcerer to our hand. Just as discard fodder, we'll discard that Sorcerer for the Retainer, add a Domain to our hand. We are going to Posthumous Army and make a copy of Phoenix. Phoenix is going to discard a Vamp to target that middle card. Really wish we hit a different card if they're going to chain the evac. We're going to Domain. They're going to MST. That's totally fine. We're going to attack them and set a card and pass. Not ideal, but they don't have a ton of gas in the tank. They're going to discard a gun for a Teus. That really doesn't let them prompt anything really particularly explosive for them, since they have no targets for gun in the graveyard. They're going to warning point what we summon off Awakening. Our Awakening target's going to destroy itself. We're going to revive that Retainer by discarding a Familiar we drew for turn. Must be nice. We're going to Posthumous Army yet again. No real reason to, but why give them a Sea Serpent on their turn if we don't have to? We're going to make a Sucker. We are going to tribute their monster for a Duke, and that will get us lethal. We will revive a Familiar, pay life points, draw a card, and add a vampire that we're missing from our deck to our hand. We're going to activate Domain, activate Kingdom, normal summon the Retainer for BM after we pay another 500 life points, get him for 1700, and for lethal with the Vampire Duke. Game number 2 here, going to be a real comedic one up against a Crow on a win streak of 11 playing Blackwings. They're going to go first. What do Blackwings going first do with the new skill and access to more cards on the limited list? Let's find out. They're going to Zephyros, Chris the Crackadon, set a card, make Blackwing Evil Swarm Nightmare the most famous Blackwing card. We're going to normal summon a Samurai Skull. Does not get over their monster, but that's totally fine. We're going to Familiar. They're going to Nightmare. I do not mind at all, because since they're being set face down, that means that they do not remember that they were summoned by their own effect. And so once they leave the field, they will not be banished. That's totally fine. Our opponent has effectively gifted us 2 face down blockers. We're going to set a copy of Takeover and Awakening. They're going to MST the Awakening. That's what we want. If they remove one of our cards, we are going to take over to revive something to get an additional search. They're going to Mountain, going to Zephyros the Elite into our set card. That's totally fine. We're going to Awakening into Kingdom, revive that Duke. Duke will mill him out of a spell, and that will allow us to target one card they control and destroy it. Very powerful, and we're just going to go clean up the game here. Send a Familiar for a Retainer, add a Domain. Activate that Domain. We are going to link summon a copy of Sucker so we can Familiar out a card we contribute. We are going to add, I believe, a second copy of Duke. I'm not quite sure. Yep, we're going to add a second copy of Duke. We could have gotten Sucker or Vamp here to tribute over our Familiar and their monster and kill them, but we'll just do this instead. Gain 2,500 and kill them with Duke. Game number 3 here, going to be up against a Seto Kaiba on really could be anything. Is it Blue Eyes? Is it Dark Magician? Is it Red Eyes? Is it Block Dragon BA? Who knows? Oh, it's Alistair the Invoker. How fun. They're going to normal summon Alistair, set 2 cards and pass, and we got 1 turn to do this, folks. We're going to summon Samurai Skull. They're going to Floodgate Trap Hole. That's not ideal, but we'll see if we can make it work. We're going to Retainer, pitch Familiar, add a Domain to our hand. We are going to Familiar, pitch Retainer, add a Duke to our hand. We're going to plan on tributing that Alistair. We're going to make a copy of Vampire Sucker here. I really throw the game here, but it's funny, so this is why I wanted to include it. We're going to pay, tribute their monster, bring back with Duke, draw a card. I should have made Unicorn here. There's no reason not to, because this is already 2 pieces of link material, and 2,000 plus 2,200 was lethal. I made a huge misplay, but it's funny because they set their invocation for no reason, and now they don't have a way of making any plays. So we leave them on 100 life points. Very funny. They're going to draw since high level, drawing into Lava Golem, Owner's Seal. They're going to attack over our monster. We are going to draw a card and pass, so they die in the standby phase. Realizing they've lost, our opponent gives up. What an incredibly skill-intensive game. All right, exciting stuff here. Going to be showing off some games against people that I know actually have completed decks. I'm going to be showing off a couple of mirror matches here versus Swamp, moderator of the channel, and the reason I decided to build Vampires in the first place. Very cool stuff here. I throw the hell out of this game, but Vampires is going to win either way, so it'll be informative in either case. Let's check out what Swamp is doing. Normal summoning Gozuki, milling a Retainer, discarding a Familiar for the Retainer, discarding a Duke for the Familiar, setting up their standard first turn play here. They're going to make Cerberus. They're going to Cerberus into a Mermaid. That's going to get them access to an Ibli. Posthumous Army. No real reason to do that other than, of course, making Sucker with Mermaid and Ibli. Ibli is going to go to our side of the field. And this is where I throw. I was supposed to normal summon Samurai Skull, but I wanted to be cute. So I normal summon Ibli instead. That right there threw the game. I threw myself out of additional resources. I could have done a couple fun things had I not done that and gone for lethal here. We're going to activate Domain after they make the standard Vampire Kingdom play. We're going to attack him for 400. I'm like, surely the zombie lock will mean something. It does not. They're going to Desire, bringing back the Sucker, sending away the Ibli, tributing our monster, making Unicorn, and that is exactly enough damage to kill us. Let's let them go to the battle phase after they BM us by special summoning 12,000 times. Oh wait, they're not done. They're going to make Bomber Dragon and kill us. All right, for real this time, another match against Swamp on the exact same deck. Vampire on Vampire Violence here. I'm going to be going second again. This match is going to showcase just how incredibly gassed up your turn 2s are on this deck. You just have a ton of ability to extend to get lethal. But again, I guess every deck that goes second in Duel Links has enough gas to kill your opponent from 4,000 life points. They're going to set 2 and pass, not opening a great hand here, or of course not wanting to play into our own posthumous army by giving us an Ibli for our own sucker. We are going to do the same thing they do, Vampire or Samurai Skull as a way to get Retainer on the field. We're going to make Phoenix. We have so much, we have an additional card in our hand, so we're just going to prompt that Awakening early. They're going to summon a Familiar. Familiar is going to add them a copy of Sorcerer. We're going to activate Domain just as a way to pay 500 life points and turn on our skill. We're going to discard a Kingdom for Mermaid's Effect, link off for Vampire Sucker, activate Familiar, send the Desire in hand. Familiar is going to search us a copy of Vamp so we can Lava Golem our opponent. We're going to Vampire Domain here, and then link Sucker and Familiar off for Unicorn, sending the Retainer we drew, spinning back that Familiar, and this is how you get lethal with Vampires. Final game of the set here against Pillar of the Community, Spaghetti God. Thank you to them so much for playing so many games. I misplayed for like 9 games in a row, so we had to play like 27,000 games to get one that was remotely usable. But it does show off the Ibli lock against a Cybers tech, and in many ways, which the lock is perhaps not enough, and you might actually want to play Super Poly. Not that we would have drawn it in this scenario. We're going to make a Cerberus here, doing our standard 2-card combo with Retainer, Familiar, and all that. We're going to search a Duke so we can get it into our graveyard with Mermaid. Mermaid will discard the Duke to search the Ibli onto our field. We're going to make a Sucker, summon Ibli to our opponent's field. That will prompt Sucker to draw us into the Monster Reborn. I guess we would have drawn Super Poly. That's actually hilarious. So I was playing Super Poly instead of Monster Reborn. We would have drawn it. That's so funny. They're going to rip the MST just that simple. We're going to activate Kingdom to revive the Familiar just so we can get the Retainer for next turn, so we can try to get our entire deck online. Funnily enough, we drew the Retainer anyway. If I had known we were going to do that, I would have searched a Vamp. They're going to make Code Talker because any 2 effect monsters make Code Talker regardless of their typing. They have Math Mech, which is everything they need to make a Decode Talker plus targeting negate through the Ibli lock. That's pretty crazy. They're going to set 1 card and through their skill set a Cybers or a Code Talker alive. We are going to make a Phoenix at link point to target the Recoded alive. They could have chained it or they could have chained Decode, but importantly, if they did chain Decode, Phoenix would not die because it is oh wait, this card doesn't prevent destruction by card effects. I'm a moron. That might have not been the correct play on their part. I keep getting Phoenix and Cerberus mixed up. Had I known that, I would have made Cerberus and tried to force out the Decode. Whoops. We're going to bring back Familiar to search the Vamp, and now we are going to make Unicorn just to free up zones. We're going to activate Monster Reborn, reviving the Sucker. Domain will allow us to extra normal summon, targeting that Decode Talker that can't protect itself, and get us in for well over 4,000 damage with our Vampire Vamp. So we're back with a deck, and while that showing certainly was impressive, in the games you didn't see, this deck basically got totally blown out in any game our Cybers opponent opened triple back row. On any game that our opponent opened triple real back row, this deck, like a lot of combo decks, both cannot play through a ton of back row and also doesn't have the space to be running back row removal. If you were playing 30 cards, you might be able to play fit 3 copies of MST or Cosmic Cyclone in, but you're even less likely to draw them. Additionally, I do not think Armageddon Keeper is worth playing. Highly recommend you be playing a Princess Sprite instead. You have more than enough removal between Phoenix, Cerberus, and Unicorn, and your tributing effects of Sucker. You could even play an additional copy of Sucker, but you're more or less able to recur it with Desire, as you saw in that game versus Swamp and in that game versus Code Talkers, where I had Monster Reborn. Other than that, I think this deck is a ton of fun to play. I don't know if it's the most optimal version of Zombies to play, but I think the inboard of Awaken or Territory plus Ibli lock or territory plus super polymerization is a lot higher than the standard Vendread inboard, which is the other deck that I think is vying for the top spot of zombie viability. So that's that. I can't necessarily say the deck was worth the 2 Dream Ticket investment I made into it when I could have gotten a 3rd Stratos and 2nd Sunrise, but all in all, I'm glad I now own the deck. It is a deck that I am a huge fan of. Hopefully it gets more support in the future as Sucker makes its way out of its selection box prison and into a more accessible form of pack. If you enjoyed this video, please do consider to like, comment, and subscribe. Commenting is huge, really helps the video gain traction. If you would be so inclined, I would consider checking out my Twitch page if you would like to see me play the decks I play on this show live. I got all the ladder replays you saw today while hanging out with chat and having a good time playing ranked. I also duel viewers and members of the Discord server to get the member replays. If you have something meta and you're good at the deck, there's a chance we might be able to get some replays going so you may appear in one of my videos in the future. All that being said, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. I will see you in the next video. Good night. Mwah.